am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of several books, no other than Mr. Baptiste Pinson.
Hey Daniel, thanks again for inviting me on your channel for the third time now, one per book. I'm honored. Thank you.
Yes, and you will be come back and come back.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yes. For the last 2 weeks, we talk about Yellow Sky Revolt and Heroes of Chaos. So let's do the recap before we gonna do the third series.
So we mentioned in the past 2 weeks my debut novel, which is Yellow Sky Revolt, the first book in the Three Kingdom Chronicles, so a series of historical fiction set in the late second century China, and then we'll move on for a story that's going to happen over 70 years ish. So Yellow Sky Revolt was the very first book, in introduction to the story of the main character and narrator Liao Hua, starting from his childhood in a farm of central China. And then we discussed Heroes of Chaos, the second book in the series, where Liao Hua is now a teenager and joins the army, is training and becomes a soldier for the warlord Cao Cao, who is a very famous figure of history in Chinese culture. So we get to discover the life of soldiers back then, but also the younger years of this famous warlord named Cao Cao. Not the younger years, he was already in his 30s, 40s, but before he became very powerful.
Yes, people, if you are interested to listen how Mr. Baptiste crafted the Yellow Sky Revolt and Heroes of Chaos, please do listen to our episode. And, of course, the third series of the book.
So now we switch to the third book in this series, which I titled Dynasty Killers. And I think the title gives a bit of indication towards what's going to happen, not only in this book but later on. So just to sum up a little bit, this story happens in the later years of the Han Dynasty. So the Han Dynasty is the first big dynasty of Chinese history. It lasted over 400 years with just a little bit of a break in the middle. And it ended in early 3rd century China. So, and after this dynasty, the Han Dynasty, China goes into a civil war known as the Three Kingdoms period, when, well, as the name suggests, China is divided into three. So that's really the elements that will lead China to break into so many kingdoms or states are discussed in Dynasty Killers.
Interesting, Mr. Baptiste. So the Dynasty Killers, is it easy for you to write?
Dynasty Killers is a little bit longer than the first two. The first two books are 90,000 words-ish, both. So both of them were pretty much the same length. Now, Dynasty Killers has an extra 20,000 words, I believe. So lengthwise, it was a little bit longer. And also, it's the first book I wrote while already being published. Now, Yellow Sky Revolt and Heroes of Chaos, I wrote them before Yellow Sky Revolt was out, which means I had more time. Now, Dynasty Killers, I wrote it while also managing the publication of the first two. So I was a lot busier when I wrote Dynasty Killers. I think it took me about 7 to 8 weeks to write the first draft, if I'm correct. Maybe it's more like 6. Then I waited a little bit before going to the second draft, third draft, etc. So, but the story itself actually moved quite naturally in the writing process. There was only one moment when I struggled a little bit with a battle, but otherwise it went very smoothly, if not fast.
So, Dynasty Killers, what something that you can offer that is not in the book one and book two?
It's how to say this? It's a lot darker. I love this book. To so far, I've written about 10, 11 books, and this is the one I prefer. I believe that's my best book. At least that's the one I prefer reading in, during the editing process. It's a lot darker. So we get back to this character who is now in his early 20s. He's the leader of special forces. He has a small unit under his leadership that is in charge of all those dark missions. So he's going through all around the empire, fulfilling missions that are not by the book, if you want. So we have this motley crew that is following him, and not all of them are good people. Actually, very few of them are good people. And so we start with this young man who starts to question whether he's following the right master or not. He's realizing that maybe all the things he's done in the past were not for the cause he thought. So he's questioning his path. He's questioning whether he's doing the right thing for the empire, for the young emperor as well, and maybe if he should leave this master and follow another way. So it's a lot darker, like I said, especially on a psychological level, because he's no longer a teenager now. He's a grown up, and he's facing the responsibility of his previous choices, and he's struggling a lot. There is a lot of struggle, a lot of characters are dying in this book. And say, I don't want to spoil too much, but a lot of characters that we've had since book one or even from book two are gonna leave the show in Dynasty Killers, and I really hope people are gonna, well, let's say maybe cry a little bit over some of those deaths.
Dynasty Killers, or you enjoyed writing it?
Oh, I loved it. That was there is one battle. It's called the Battle of One, WAN, and I've never enjoyed writing a scene so much. I think it's I think it might be one of the biggest battle I've written so far in all of my books, and it's the only one I wrote in one sitting. So I basically spent whole day and evening on it. I finished this battle. I was shaking and I was quite hungry and a little bit depressed at everything that happened in it. But I'm really happy about this one. I loved writing Dynasty Killers a lot.
You finalized already writing the books. If you given a chance to go back and revise one of the chapter that you want to revise, which one?
Like I said, I struggle with one battle. It's called the Battle of it's not the Battle of Boma. That's the Battle of Yan Ford, which is a historical battle, of course. I'm not very happy about it, to be honest. I think it might be a bit confusing. I don't know if I would go back on it, because I don't know how different I could make it. But let's say I'm not the most. That's not the scene I'm the most happy with so far. There's a couple of dialogues I might write differently as well, but altogether, I'm pretty confident about Dynasty Killers.
Yes, indeed. What are your preparation in writing Dynasty Killers, most especially the battles?
Now the battles are getting very serious in Dynasty Killers. In the first book, it was mostly peasants rebelling against the government, but neither side had a professional army back then. That's something that I found very interesting when researching about those years, is that the Han Dynasty, by its latest years, didn't really have a very strong professional army. They had like frontier men, so people protecting the border, the northern border, but not in amazing numbers. And then the Civil War kind of started, and then soldiers became more and more professional with with the experience of all those battles. So in book two, we see the army shaping up. to becoming a more professional environment. And some warlords are being swept away because they didn't adapt. They didn't manage to create their own professional army. Now, by book 3, the remaining warlords are all very professional. They have very strong soldiers, leaders, officers, and all of this. So battles start to be very brutal and in a way that they were not in the previous one. Basically, you have people, warlords fighting each other at the same level. And I think it shows in Dynasty Killers, because those battles, they last longer. You have siege, which didn't really happen before. It can last weeks or months. And I think the research I did to prepare for those battles was checking, okay, how would they handle the artillery? What kind of tools would they use, or how would they undermine the enemy's position, and all of this. So I did more research on how to conduct a siege, how they did conduct siege back then. But I think even more than this, I had to search into the lives of famous historical figures. Because I think I mentioned it to you in the first podcast, but this story of the Three Kingdoms has a historic version of it, and also a more legendary, mythological side of it, I could say. Not mythological, more folkloric side of it. And some characters in the legend are being painted as, heroic and amazing people. Some of them are even benevolent and everything. In reality, they were really, human and flawed, and probably quite brutal as well. So I had to dive more into the historical side of it to find some interesting pointers as to how I wanted to develop those characters. So yeah, I think those are the two greatest part of my research for Dynasty Killers.
Very well said, Mr. Baptiste. But before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening in Kenya. Thank you so much, Kenya. In Nairobi, I got 51% audience share. Nairobi province at 45%. Mombasa district at 2%. Nakuru district at 1%. And last but not the least, Kasi district at 1%. Thank you, Kenya, for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Baptiste Pinson. Dynasty Killer is what behind the title of your third series.
So, all right, I'm a little bit embarrassed about this one, but actually, like this story of the Three Kingdoms became very popular in the last couple of decades because of, or thanks to a series of video games called Dynasty Warriors.
Yes.
So Dynasty Warriors is an amazing game, and I wanted to, how to say this? I wanted to create a title that sounded a bit like Dynasty Warriors, not so much for the idea of copying it, but just for people to realize, hey, that's related. So Dynasty Warriors, Dynasty Killers. There is, you can feel that there is something in common there, and also some of the battles I prefer in those video games take place in Dynasty Killers. So I wanted to make a connection between this beloved franchise of video games and my own series.
Yes, indeed. But do you have a second option for the title?
Did I have? I don't think I had another option in head. I know the next one, actually, I changed the title. So this is how it went. Usually I have a working title. For Dynasty Killers, it was Dynasty Killers from the beginning, I believe. Now, the next one for a long time was supposed to be called Blood Riders. I'm giving you a bit of a scoop here. so the next, a bit of spoiler, the book number 4 was going to be Blood Riders. So during the whole writing process, it was called Blood Riders. And then I checked, and you already have a bunch of books titled Blood Riders. So right before I created the file for Dynasty Killers to become a paperback. So, in the last pages, I'm saying like to be continued in, and then I insert the title of the next book. So I changed this at the last second. So the book number 4, just for you, is going to be Forest of Swords. So that's the book number 4. So this one changed during the process. I think I had other ideas. Dynasty Killers was supposed to be Dynasty Killers from the start.
Okay, this is original. so, so this is your favorite question. Dynasty Killers, the best highlight.
Well, I think this is what I mentioned earlier. Dynasty Killers is really dark, in the way that the previous two were not. All right, like I said, this main character, Liao Hua, he's evolving a lot in Dynasty Killers. He's realizing a lot of things he did are not good, didn't bring a lot of good to the world, and he wants to correct it. And some events, actually, there is a series of 3 or 4 events happening in Dynasty Killers that will really shape his path going forward. And all of those events, those 3 events, are psychologically very hard on him, and hopefully on the reader as well. Most of them are historical as well, so that's a great way to rediscover a history of China that sometimes is too factual. Right? When you study history, it's very factual. That's the point of history anyway. But we don't always connect emotionally with those events that happened maybe 2,000 years ago. And I wanted Dynasty Killers to connect the reader to those people that existed, who were real people, and well, a lot of terrible things happened to them. Some of them died in a gruesome way or very despicable ways. I wanted to show the reality of this time period in Dynasty Killers. So if you like historical fiction set in war times, but you also want to rediscover those real human people, Dynasty Killers is for you.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Baptiste. So I did not ask you before, why did you name your series The Three Kingdoms Chronicles?
Well, this one is actually quite simple. Three Kingdoms, that's the name of this era. And there have been 2 major sources for the Three Kingdoms spreading as a historical period. The first one was called the Sangguozhi. So the Three Kingdoms could also be translated as Three Kingdoms Chronicles. I think it's more the Three Kingdoms records, right? So it was written right at the end of the Three Kingdoms, and it's more like a historical records of what happened, a biography. It's like a huge biography list of all those characters who lived through the Three Kingdoms. Then in the 14th century, there was a novel written about the Three Kingdoms called The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, so Sanguo Yuanyi. And so you already had 2 sources. So you had the Romance of the Three Kingdoms and then the records of the Three Kingdoms. I wanted something that felt a bit in between, So Chronicles, I felt, had this historical and at the same time fiction value to it. And that's a way to tell the reader, hey, look, this is going to be a bit like both. You're going to have a lot of fiction in it. It's going to be very character centric, but at the same time, I'm going to put more historical points than in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, for example.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Baptiste. So let's talk about the main character of Dynasty Killers.
So still the same. It's going to be the same for a long time. So as he narrates the story, he's a very old man on the morrow of his empire's defeat, or kingdom's defeat, I should say. His name is Liao Hua then, but when he tells the story at the time of his early 20s, he's still named Liao Chun. He's still fighting for this warlord named Cao Cao. And he's so book 3 and book 4, which is a novella, is the closing of the first arc of his life story. So this is the closing of the first period, which I personally call the Cao Cao period, when he serves this warlord who is basically becoming the most powerful man in the empire through cunning. I don't know what else do you want to know about about Liao Hua.
So if we talk about the main character, let's talk about the villain.
So yeah, the villain. So as we begin the Dynasty Killers, you don't have one clear villain because, well, that's historical fiction. It's either everyone is a villain or no one is really a villain most of the time. So the main character Liao Hua, he's obeying this warlord Cao Cao, who is the puppet master of the emperor at this time, and well, he's trying to help him and basically push the borders of his territory. So anyone that is at the border fighting against Cao Cao would be considered the enemy. Maybe not the villain, but the enemy. Then, as Dynasty Killers goes, Cao Cao will become the villain in many ways, at least from the point of view of Liao Hua. So I don't want to say too much because that would be spoiling, but that's really the point of Dynasty Killers, is to see how Cao Cao became the villain of this story and the man that Liao Hua will fight for the very long time, for the remaining future. So this is not a spoiler, by the way. We know from the beginning that Cao Cao will be the enemy of Liao Hua in the future. So this Dynasty Killers is the moment where this happens, where Cao Cao is becoming the enemy of the main character.
Before we go on, Mr. Baptiste, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Comedy 101 with Mr. Mike Lucas. We did our third episode yesterday, so please do check our latest episode because we're gonna teach you how to laugh or how to entertain people. As you said, laughter is the best medicine. Plus, one more, I have this coming book called Abstract Poetry Volume 1. Emotions. It's all about emotion, people. Emotions like happiness, sadness, and I did a poetry about that. So please do support me. Please do grab a copy. I'm gonna publish this last week of June. So please do watch out for that. Abstract Poetry Volume 1, Emotions. So, Mr. Baptiste, what else you can say about Dynasty Killers?
I think there are a lot of stories coming to an end in Dynasty Killers, and some stories starting there. So it's really a turning point in the way that maybe Heroes of Chaos, for example, wasn't. Even though the series is going to be very long, it works in terms of trilogies, or maybe four. Yeah, I think let's say like you basically have 3 arcs in this series. By the end, there will be about 3 arcs, and Dynasty Killers, along with the 4th book, Forest of Swords, is really works as the end of the first arc. So a lot of stories are coming to an end. New characters will show up, but I think there are more characters leaving than coming in Dynasty Killers. So I think it's mostly about that. Also, this is the end of Liao Hua's innocent years, in the sense that that's it. Now he's gone. His childhood is gone. His teenagerhood is gone. He's a full-grown man, and he has a lot of responsibilities coming on.
Oh, yes, and it will be published when, Mr. Baptiste?
So it will be published on August 10. I chose this date because in some places it is considered as the birthday of Guan Yu. Now, Guan Yu in China is considered the god of war, god of wealth, business, and some other things. And Guan Yu is one of the central characters in this series. I don't know if it's really his birthday. I just wanted a date around late July, early August, so I thought it worked pretty well.
Yes, I hope it will become bestseller. So what are the interval of your book 1, book 2, and book 3?
Between the publication, you mean, or timeline?
Yes, the timeline.
The timeline. So the first book spans over 6 years, right? So it starts in 184 and ends in 190. And the book 2 starts immediately after book 1, so 190, and goes all the way to 196. And book 3 starts a few weeks after that, I think. So it goes from 196 to 200. So it's just 4 years.
Just
Four
four
years.
years. Just 4 years, but you did already three books.
Yeah, and and book number four, so which is a novella, will actually be very different because it's only on a 2 weeks story. It will be just a very short story, no time jump, no nothing like this.
Yes, indeed, people. So let's support Mr. Baptiste Wu for a coming novel, Dynasty Killers, coming this August 10. Let's support him because there's more series to come. He's planning to be 100 series.
Maybe not.
So, in writing, Mr. Baptiste, I asked you this before. Your
Hmm.
long-term goal.
Well, I want to have a big spot within the historical fiction, historical fantasy genre. I want to keep writing as much as possible. I just love it so much. Like yesterday, for example, I had for the first time this year, I believe I had a full day of writing, nothing else to do. So I managed to put 9 or 10,000 words on a new story, completely different from the Three Kingdoms. It just feels amazing to write. So I just want to keep writing, and in order to do this, well, I need to have readership. So
Yes.
having a strong name within the historical fiction, historical fantasy genre would be my goal, is my goal, and it's gonna happen, even if it might take a little bit of time.
Yes, indeed. So, what do you think? What is a good quality of a novel?
I think last week I mentioned the conflict, right? Um,
Yes.
so I think again, very quickly, conflict is is a primordial source of a good novel. I think without conflict, it's difficult to keep the interest uh, of the reader, at least more than a few pages. Um, but I think, yeah, like working on the characters' motivations is very important as well. I think I mentioned, sorry, I mentioned this last time as
Yes.
well. And I don't know, they have so many details that are very important in writing a good book. Some of them are maybe not essential to every book or to every writer. Some writers love to plot like me. Some others prefer to pence their way through it and just discover the story as they write it. For me, I just love having the story in my head before I start writing. It just goes faster and more smoothly this way. But I think having a passion for your own story is the way to write a good book. Um, you hear sometimes of people who write books because they feel like it's going to be trendy, and I think it feels when you read those books later on that they didn't put as much love maybe into it. Maybe they enjoyed it. I don't know. I just feel like if you write the story that you want to read, it's going to be definitely much better. Um, doesn't mean you should not think from a marketing point of view from the beginning, but at least passion should come first, then marketing second. At least
Definitely.
I hope that's how it is.
Yes, I agree with you. Passion number one, because it really reflects of what you're writing. Just like the book of Alexander Dumas, what we talked yesterday. One of the classic. I love that much. So, do you think, Mr. Baptiste, that your books will be timeless?
No, they will age at some point. Every book tends to, I mean, even classics in many ways, they age at some point and then they might come back later on in fashion. Like, yeah, you just mentioned Dumas. I'm sure that Alexandre Dumas had moments when people didn't read them as much. Nah, maybe not yet. He's just too good. It's
Yes.
timeless so far, but it might become out of fashion at some point. My books, I I really hope are following what people like right now. I hope I wrote them in a very modern way, but at the same time keeping this historical feel to it. So no, I hope they will be enjoyable for people for the next 100 years or so.
Yes, definitely. So, if you describe Yellow Sky Revolt, what is it?
Yellow Sky Revolt.
Yes, if you
Uh,
describe it.
so So Yellow Sky Revolt is really the story of a child being thrown into a world he doesn't really know. Well, like every children mostly. He's swept into this peasant rebellion. He goes from a small farm to across an empire and discovers so much in the process about life and about war. So that would be Yellow Sky Revolt, the discovery of a big world from the eyes of a child who grew maybe 6-7 years on a small farm.
Heroes of Chaos.
Well, this child has now grown and discovers what it means to be a soldier and all the hardship that comes with it. He also discovers what it means to become a man as well. And maybe that he can have an impact on the world around him. So he went from being basically a victim or a spectator of this world to being an actor of his time.
And of course, Dynasty Killers.
Well, now he discovers that as an actor, he did a lot of damage to the empire, and he discovers that he has a conscience after all, and maybe he can rectify all the wrong, or maybe some of the wrong happening around him, sometimes because of him, sometimes in spite of him.
Yes, people, let's support the Three Kingdoms Chronicles of Mr. Baptiste Pinson because it's one of a kind. Yellow Sky Revolt, Heroes of Chaos, and of course, Dynasty Killers. So, Mr. Baptiste, can you please invite our listeners to buy all your books?
So please, dear listeners of Book 101, go check my books on Amazon. They are, for the moment, exclusively on Amazon. But also Kindle Unlimited. You may already purchase Yellow Sky Revolt and Heroes of Chaos in Kindle and paperback. And at the moment, Dynasty Killers is available for pre-order on ebook, just on ebook at the moment. So please go check. Yellow Sky Revolt is the Kindle version of Yellow Sky Revolt is at 0.99 cents. For the moment, and I believe it will stay like this for a while, so you don't risk a lot by trying this series.
Yes, indeed. So, Mr. Baptiste, if one of the 5 traditional publishing want to approach you and to be part of their publishing company, do you accept it?
I think I would absolutely think about it. I'm not sure how much I would love them to take the Three Kingdoms Chronicles within. That's a bit of my... I've been pushing this series by myself for 3 books already, so I wouldn't mind continuing like this. But I have plenty of other stories and books that might fit into traditional publishing. Now, I have no problem with self-publishing. I absolutely love it. So, with whatever, it works.
Yes, wherever you happy, right?
Exactly.
And earn lots of money. Come on.
Yeah,
Yes.
that doesn't hurt. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So, Mr. Baptiste, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for inviting me 3 times in a row. Very happy about it.
Yes, and again, please, people, let's support Mr. Baptiste because if you support him, more books to come and more books to read. Bodycon people, see you soon.
Bye, guys. Thank you, Daniel.